Hello YouTube, this is a response to a user, I think it's pronounced DonQuxotedeKaw, something like that, and it's in turn a response to one of my videos called What Would Make It Worth It. The response that you've made there, Don, I'll call you Don if that's alright, seems to be presenting well, several things with it. I can't deal with all the points you make in detail there, although thanks for providing this, the bulk of your script. I'm not working from the script, I'll just work from a couple of bullet points in my head. And there's quite a lot you're in there, but I'll just pick up on, as I say, on a few points. The first is, well, somewhere you say, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And I made a note of one of the phrases you said. You described statements like mine as declarations of incompetence. I just have to question that. I'm not really talking about incompetence. I mean, I wouldn't dream of speaking for every person that isn't a grinning idiot and saying that they're all smart. Of course not. But in terms of what we're talking about here, and in terms of the competency which I was trying to refer to in my original video, possibly inadequately, it's really about a competency in terms of knowledge of biosystems. I mean, you're talking about kind of Gaia theory, and you're wearing a Gaia t-shirt, and yeah, I mean, I don't know of anyone who is in this kind of discussion who isn't aware of that. And in fact, in the video that I mentioned that you're responding to, I talk a lot about, I don't use the word biosystem or Gaia theory or ecology, any of those kind of terms, but I certainly talk about the undeniable truth of our embeddedness within larger systems. I give examples from chemistry, of space, of energy, but it would equally apply to systems. We are undoubtedly animals within an animal kingdom which overlaps with a biochemical and energetic sets of kingdoms and systems, of course, and yeah, I know that. And I've read the works of Lovelock and Margulis, and I've read about autopoiesis, and I know of Varela and Maturana's take on that. And yeah, I'm not an expert by any means, but I've read a few books. So I wouldn't say. So if I am coming from a position of incompetence, it's not completely unschooled incompetence. I'm certainly not a biosystem denier, if such a thing exists. I say that because the impersonation that you give, this impersonation, the impersonation you give, it strikes me more of a kind of Holocaust denier or a evolution denier. That's the kind of impression you're giving of people, if not me, then people like me, who don't share your what I take to be an unrealistically optimistic vision of the universe. No, I understand the way the universe works to a reasonable degree, and I understand the position of humans within that. It doesn't bring me the comfort it seems to bring you, and I don't think there's any, and that's not because of incompetence, I don't think. Okay, yeah, the part that I find more problematic with your video here, Don, is not so much the that kind of implication of incompetence. It's more to do with what I kind of interpret as a kind of chauvinism on your part, a kind of human-centered chauvinism. I may want to just notes from your video, so I can just read this back to you. Just have a quick look. Sorry, I looked at the wrong piece of paper. Here we go. Yeah, you talk about as being natural explorers, spreader of seeds, and the conveyor of the bioweb. And you talk about as being the reproductive organ of life itself, like we're some big, weird dick attached to a giant DNA molecule. No, I disagree. Well, I mean, it's an interesting word you could take there, but I personally would see that as chauvinistic. You know, what gives us the right as humans to carry the banner for life itself, or to act as a reproductive organ for life itself? What makes us those conveyors, those distributors, those spreaders of seeds? You know, are we Gaia's chosen people all of a sudden? You know, I mean, because that's starting to look very much like the kind of religious gloss on physical facts that you kind of accuse other people of having. I don't for one moment suggest, well, I don't really think Gaia itself in the way that you're talking about is terribly helpful, but biosystems, like any other systems, are necessarily systemic. and systems don't have favourites. You know, we are not the chosen people. We have not been chosen to be the reproductive organs or the spreader of seeds or the the distributor, the conveyor of the bioweb. I can't imagine why that would fall to us. And convey it where? You know, is this the same kind of conveyance that took the missionaries into the third world, or took the colonists into the States? Is it that kind of an image you got in mind there? Is that how the seeds will be conveyed out into space, as you put it? For all we know, space might already be colonised. You know what I mean? There might be life forms already out there. It's unlikely, but who knows? There might be. So what right have we got to think of ourselves as the kind of being given the keys to the magical kingdom of space, just because we happen to be born with this enlarged forebrain that gives us this thing called consciousness? I don't buy it. I really don't buy that. And just that whole chauvinistic take on it, you know, this idea that we are, as you say, natural explorers, spreaders of seeds, conveyor of the bioweb, the reproductive organ of life itself. I mean, those are exactly the kinds of thoughts, it seems to me, that kind of representation of ourselves as this kind of macho, thrusting, terribly self-important beings, which have produced the kinds of real-world problems that you indicate elsewhere in your video. You know, the problems that we have with the biosphere, the problems that we have with pollution, the problems that we have with overconsumption and overpopulation. All those problems, you know, which are very real, are, as far as I can see, an exact product of exactly the kind of thinking that you're talking about. You know, because for good reason. You know, the kind of urges which allows us to see ourselves in these grandiose terms as the reproductive organs of life itself. That kind of urge to see ourselves in that way is exactly the same urge which caused us to despoil the planet and caused us to exploit one another outrageously, and caused us to distribute our seed in ways which are really counterproductive by being over-reproductive. So yeah, I think there's a huge problem there that you're indicating. Yeah, the last thing I just need to point out, I think, is a slightly more troubling concern I have with your video, which I've kind of heard elsewhere in other places, which is this assumption. You know, you say you're not mad at me, and you gesture towards the stupidity of certain people who, you know, you speak of in terms of incompetences, and some of your language is slightly embittered. And what seems to be coming through there is a refusal to believe that a person could be anything other than optimistic, or anything other than having the kinds of beliefs you have, which you kind of identify with pantheism. That a person could not have those beliefs and still be a moral person. I mean, you seem to think that morality and being a good person, almost, and not despoiling the planet, or not being a polluter, or not contributing to the overpopulation, that the only people who can really make those positive gestures in the world are those people who buy into what you're selling. The pantheism, biosystems, Gaia, that whole thing. You know, it sounds very much like the kind of thing that William Lane Craig says about Christianity and God talk, you know, that you need to have a religion to be God. It's a bit like that line from the Brothers Karamazov in Dostoevsky, you know, where he says that one of the characters says, I should say, that, you know, without God anything is permitted. You know, as if by, if I can rephrase it in your terms, as if by my refusing to buy into the optimism, and refusing to buy into the human chauvinism that you seem to be indicating, and refusing to buy into the pantheism, that I am necessarily abandoning morality, I am necessarily abandoning intelligence, I am necessarily throwing away any contact with good human values. And that's, you know, it's wrong when fundamentalist Christians say it about atheists, and it's wrong when pantheists say it about atheists. It's wrong when happy people say it about people who aren't happy. It's wrong when optimists say it about what I would consider to be realists. So I think there's something more problematic there. I think it wouldn't do any of us any harm to be a little bit more modest about what a human being is. I think it would not do any of us any harm to be a little more accepting of people who believe different things than we believe, and and I don't think it does anybody any good to question their intelligence just because they disagree with you. Anyway, thanks very much for that video. I enjoyed watching that.